So I'll be reading for the Torah reading Isaiah, the 13th chapter, and it will be an introduction going into our message. It says, "The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Lift up a banner on a bare mountain, make the voice rise to them, wave the hand that they may enter the gates of nobles." And whenever we see the term banner, it's a messianic term. It's showing that we're end time or even millennial, depending on the context of the scripture. He says, "I have commanded my holy ones. I have also called my warriors for my anger, those who rejoice in my majesty." So one of the things that I've been seeing in the last couple of years is, just like Yom Teruah is coming up, tomorrow evening it will start, is that many times you see things in Scripture, and even in the Hebrew, that you look at a word in Hebrew and it can be positive or negative, depending on what the context is. Yom Teruah is a perfect example because it's technically not the Feast of Trumpets. It's the Feast of clamoring. It's the Feast of making noise. And that noise can be an exciting, good noise, you know, like when Yeshua is returning and people are excited and they see him coming, or it can be a bad noise, that people that don't want him coming. So depending on where you are, what side you're on, that depends on what the Feast of Yom Teruah is going to mean to you. So we see the same thing here. "I've commanded my holy one, my sanctified ones. I've called my warriors for my anger, those who rejoice in my majesty." So the thing that believers have to fear when this time comes is what's coming very shortly, when the beast power sets up his kingdom for 42 months, and Satan is going to be allowed to test the saints, and he's going to overcome them. And many believers will be martyred. All kinds of things will happen. So we don't have to wonder if bad things happen to us or trials come, or even if we're martyred. We don't have to wonder, how could Yahweh allow that to happen? It's part of His Word. It's part of His Word that will happen. Because our hope is not in this flesh. It's not in this life, but it's in what's coming. But when Yahweh's wrath comes, when the day of Yahweh comes, it will not be on His people whatsoever. So no matter where you are on the earth, if you're alive at that time, because remember, when Yeshua returns, He gathers His elect from the four corners of the earth. So not everybody will be in one spot. But wherever you are on the earth during the wrath of Yahweh, you will not be affected if you're alive at that time. "The noise of the multitude in the mountains, as of a great people. A noise of tumult of the kingdoms of nations gathered together." We're starting to see this. "Yahweh of hosts is calling up an army for the battle. They come from a distant land, from the end of the heavens. Yahweh and the weapons of His wrath to destroy all the land. Howl, for the day of Yahweh is at hand." So definitely there's no doubt of the context of what we're reading here. "Howl, for the day of Yahweh is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. On account of this, all hands will droop, and every heart of man shall melt." So even today, particularly in Western society, where you see this arrogance, you know, and people will say, "Take your God, we don't want to hear it." I mean, they're so arrogant, thinking the way they do. When it comes here, like it says, all hands will droop and every heart of man will melt. Because when Yahweh's wrath comes on the earth, it's not going to be a pretty picture. And if you've ever been in a really, really bad storm, you know, in Italy, we've been in really, really bad electrical storms. And you can't believe, I mean, you're so afraid when you hear that thunder and the lightning's coming, and even hitting the place where we were staying, and fire was coming out of the outlets. So it's a pretty scary sight with Yahweh's power that comes. And the world calls it Mother Nature, but we know it's not Mother Nature, it's Father Yahweh. He says, "On account of this all hands will droop and every heart of man will melt. And they will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain like one giving birth. They shall be amazed, each man to his neighbor. Faces of flame shall be their faces. Behold, the day of Yahweh comes, cruel and with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land waste, and He shall destroy its sinners out of it." So that's the key to it. The wrath of Yahweh is not coming on the unsuspecting good people. It's coming on the sinners of this earth. "For the stars of the heavens and their constellations shall not give light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not reflect its light." Now again, this can be several different things. It can be conjunctions that we're seeing that happens at times, but also at this time, it could also be from supervolcanoes, you know, that will cover the sun and the moon. It could be asteroid or something hitting the earth, also causing something. but something that will definitely be very world ecliptic. And I will visit evil on the world, and their iniquity on the wicked, and I will cause the arrogance of the proud to cease, and I will humble the pride of tyrants. And this is one of the things, as we're getting closer to the end, that I personally see. I know a lot of brethren have conveyed the same thoughts to me, that as you see the Spirit of Yahweh being poured out more, and which should for Yahweh's people, I know it is for myself, it's a humbling thing. To understand Yahweh's word more, to understand Him more, to get closer to Him. It humbles us because we realize how high He is and how low we are. But from Babylon, it's the opposite. You're seeing pride in a way that you could never imagine. You're seeing arrogance of people. You're seeing just the opposite that's happening. Because as the Spirit of Yahweh is being poured out, so is the spirit of the evil one. He says, I will make a man more rare than fine gold, even a man more than the carvings of Ophir. So again, we see there's not going to be many people left on the earth after the day of Yahweh. But, as I've said many times, even if it's only 1% of the earth, and you're looking at 8 billion people, that's still 80 million people. That's still a lot of people that's there. So I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall move out of its place in the wrath of Yahweh of hosts, and in the day of His fierce anger. And it shall be as a gazelle driven away, and as a sheep no one gathers. Each man shall look to his own people, and each one shall flee to his own land. Everyone is found shall be pierced through, yea, everyone who is swept away shall fall by the sword. And their children will be dashed in pieces before their eyes, their houses shall be robbed, and their wives raped. Behold, I stir up the Medes against them, who shall not value silver, they shall not delight in gold. And we know Babylon's destruction coming from the Medes and the Persians. The Medes are the, if you look at the areas where Media, the empire was, it's the area today of Russia and some of the provinces that are up there, Ukraine and some of those areas. Persia is pretty easy to know because Iran was called Persia until I think it was 1926, something like that, that they started calling it Iran. And the word actually comes from the word for iron in Hebrew, They say it would be interesting if they knew that their name Iran is actually a Hebrew word. And bows shall also smash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare sun. So it's not going to be a pretty picture when the judgment comes on Babylon. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the pride of the Chaldeans, shall be as when Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Talk more about that in the message. It shall not be lived in forever, nor shall it be lived in from generation to generation. And the desert wanderer shall not pitch her tent there, nor shall the shepherds make flocks lie down there. And one of the proofs of this, which is really interesting, if you go back probably 20, 25 years ago, the majority of first fruit believers were probably living in Babylon at that time. Now, just 20, 25 years later, probably less than 1% of first fruit believers are in Babylon. And I might be even being generous with that quote. So we really see it. And the sad part is, in Babylon, they don't know it. They don't know that Yahweh's Spirit isn't there anymore. They don't know. It's you're seeing the Laodicean spirit of thinking they're rich and increased with goods in need of nothing. And really, they're poor, they're blind, they're miserable, naked. But like he says, as Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the pride of the Chaldeans shall be as when Yahweh overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall not be lived in forever, nor shall it be lived in from generation to generation. And some of the people there still say they had a dream. They're using the wrong name. Anyway, I had a dream from God that we're going to be protected. My property is a refuge. And it's against Scripture. I'm not saying anything personally against anyone and their beliefs. Whatever is not of faith is sin. But I can tell you from Scripture, it's very clear that there is no refuge in Babylon. That there's 7 direct commands, we'll go into it in the message, of getting out of there for that simple reason, that Yahweh is going to destroy it and not one person will be left. Because His kingdom is not a kingdom of Babylon. Babylon is everything that's evil in the eyes of Yahweh and everything against His kingdom. He says, but the desert creatures shall lie there, and their houses will be full of howling creatures, and daughters of ostriches shall dwell there, and he-goats shall skip there, and hyenas shall cry along with his widows. And if you ever heard a hyena cry, where we are over here near the gorge, it's a really creepy sound when you hear a hyena. It's like something you don't want to really hear. And jackals and palaces of delight, yea, her time to come is near, and her days shall not be prolonged. So, of course, this is written by Isaiah back going more than 2,740 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet. Matter of fact, end time Babylon only started in this last generation. So the question always comes up, when will it happen? How will it happen? I'll get into that a little more in the message. But the reality of it here is not by setting a timetable, but it's to prove the word of Yahweh that yes, it will happen. There's no doubt. If you believe in the word of Yahweh, if you believe the Bible to be his unadulterated word, then we know it's true. Unfortunately today, even in religious circles, even within Christianity and religious circles, you're hearing more and more of pastors or priests saying that the Bible is not to be taken literal. That it's a book that just gives you outlines, that these stories are not true. Even here in Israel, believe it or not, there's a vast majority of people, even rabbis, even within Judaism, that they believe that the Bible is only stories. They don't believe. There's stories to give a message, but they don't believe there really was an Adam and an Eve. They don't believe that these people were real characters. So, one rabbi that I was talking to, that I was asking, well, do you believe Abraham was a real character? Oh, well, of course, Abraham's a real character. So, when does Abraham come into the Bible? At Genesis, 18 or whatever it is, right? So, at what point did they stop being mystical characters and they started to be real people? When you look at the genealogy that's in the Tanakh, there's a genealogy before Abraham. It doesn't start with Abraham. It starts with Adam to Seth to all the way down. So it's not logical, but it's true. Believe it or not, it's something that people don't hear about too much outside of the land, but it's really something that's over here. So my only point to show in the Torah reading now is that it is true. There is a destruction that's coming. It's not a pretty picture. But for believers, we don't have to fear it. It's not something that believers should be fearing. Because if you're in the will of Yahweh and you're looking forward to his kingdom, then what would be in us that would want Babylon to stand? I look forward to the fall of Babylon, not because of the people. I have pity for the people there. My family's there. I don't want anyone to perish. But at the same rate, I know that the kingdom of Yahweh can't come until Babylon falls. And I know Yahweh's a merciful Elohim, and I just have to pray to him that he would have mercy on anybody there that doesn't deserve what's coming, and maybe they would die immediately. But why wouldn't I be praying every day of my life for Babylon to end and the kingdom of Yahweh to start? And Yahweh shows us what a grievance, evil, disgusting, sinful place that it is. And like I said, I'll read some more scriptures in the message to show us that it's something that is very, very anti-Yahweh, the total contrariness to Yahweh. So I think I will stop there. We could turn off the film for now, and we will open up to the floor. If anybody has any comments or questions that they would like to share or ask, feel free. Shabbat Shalom again. Shabbat Shalom to all that will watch this with us. It's really been a really interesting year for myself, and I think for a lot of the brethren too. But particularly with the Shemitah coming. Now we have one day to the Shemitah. And I've studied the Shemitah for years, but never has Yahweh revealed as many things about the Shemitah that he has now. So I'm just really learning and still learning so much about it. I plan to give a really good message in Sukkot on the Shemitah. But the one thing I'm learning is, that I didn't know before, is how many things in the Bible run around sevens. And the 7 being the Shemitah cycle. And when you understand it, it's like cracking a code. So many other things come from that. I'm going to show you one today. But it's amazing how you see things in a different light from that. Today the message is called Babylon Given 70 Years to Rule the Nations. And I want to talk about that some because, it's interesting that I've been preaching about America being Babylon for about 20 years. And you could listen to messages I gave almost 20 years ago on this, and you would think I'm a prophet, because, you hear these things and they're more profound and true now than they ever were. But at the same rate, there's still people that will try to deny it. And my first question is, whenever I give a message, and today isn't to prove America's Babylon, because I got many other messages on that. I'll probably at the feast give a Bible study on it. But I always tell the people before I start a message, write down whoever Babylon can be. Write down America, write down United Nations, write down Saudi Arabia, some people say. Write down anybody, and as we go through the characteristics, just put a check mark next to each one. And at the end of the sermon, you'll see it. And only America fits. There's about 100 characteristics about Babylon. Do you know next to Jerusalem, there is more said about Babylon than any other entity in the Bible, and Babylon's not even part of Israel. You know, it's outside of here. So it's extremely important subject. A matter of fact, you have two, or actually in the Tanakh, you probably have 4 whole chapters that I could think off the top of my head. Jeremiah 15:51, Isaiah 13, Isaiah 47. 4 whole chapters just on Babylon. Beside, in Revelation, a book that's only on the end, 2 whole chapters just on Babylon. So you can't say it's not important. It's extremely important, not only for the people living in America, but remember, Babylon is a system that America has taken to the world. So it affects every human being on this planet. And that's why this is so important. So I do want to start in Revelation 18, just to kind of set a foundation here. Revelation 18 and verse 7. He says, by what things she, Babylon, glorified herself and luxuriated, by so much give back to her torment and mourning, because she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I will not be a widow, I will not see sorrow. Because of this, in one day her plagues will come, death and mourning and famine, and she will be consumed with fire, for Yahweh Elohim, who is judging her, is strong. And I know for Americans, they don't really understand this. I didn't understand it before I left America, that 70 to 80% of the world is living on $1 to $5 a day or a week even, depending on where you're living. But let's use the higher one. Let's say $5 a day. That at least 80% of the world is making $25 a week or less. Can you imagine that? And they're living on it, and they're doing it. And the reason why America is living in this luxury is at the expense of somebody else. It's that simple. You know, we were talking on the way over about China and the things with China going on there. But I said to Petra, I said, it's not just China. If you look when Bill Clinton was in office in 1998 and they signed NAFTA and GATT, when you look in the back of your clothes, you can buy a Gucci shirt, and in the back it'll say made in Honduras, you know, made in Nicaragua, made over here, because they're using slave labor all over the world. You know, it's not just in one part. That's the way it is. They allowed American corporations to go all over the world. Philippines, same thing. And these people will work for 10 cents an hour, 20 cents an hour, for nothing, so that Americans can get cheaper things. And this is why Yahweh's saying she luxuriated herself. And I know it's been tough. Another thing that's a misconception is when you come from America and you go to a place like South America or Central America or Africa, if you come from America, you're a millionaire. Everybody thinks you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're not. Just the fact that you have an American passport, they think that you are rich. But you know what? If you're an American, to them you are rich. Because do you know that most Africans you will meet have never even had a $100 bill ever in their hand? Some of them have never had $100 in their life to put together. There's times where I'll get emails at Passover time that they can't afford $5 or $4 for a bottle of wine for the congregation, and I gotta wire money down to them for something like that. And you can't believe how poor the world is living at Babylon. That's what Yahweh's saying. So if it's not America, what other country is living in this luxury at the expense of other people? And that's why I say, if you just logically think to yourself, there's only one it can be. Then we see over here in verse 9, and the kings of the earth will weep for her, and they'll wail for her, those having fornicated, spiritually speaking, maybe physically, and having luxuriated with her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing from afar off, because the fear of her torment, saying, woe, woe to the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour a judgment came. Another thing people bring up, but this is a city, America's a country. You know, and it's like in the Bible we see it, Rome is a city, Rome is a country. It's interchangeable. It's interchangeable. So yes, maybe New York City is the city of Babylon and America is the country, but as we'll see, Babylon it's the steam engine of the world economy. There's not one city that's doing that. Babylon has an army. There's no one city that has an army. Some person tried to say the Vatican. And I said, come on. Those 4 guys with the hats that's standing in front, they're the world policemen? Come on, let's be serious about it, you know? And that's what I'm saying. People don't want to, you've got to look at everything. But beside being the #1 economic power in the world, and I'm going to read some stats here to you that will blow your mind in a minute. Babylon is also the #1 military. They're the hammer of the earth. They pound other nations. The Vatican is not doing that. Those 4 guys with the hats, it just doesn't work that way. So this is why it's saying, 1 hour judgment. And the merchants of the earth, verse 11, weep and mourn over her. Why? Because no one buys their merchandise anymore. Do you realize that, yes, China, for the first time ever, it's one of the things that's proving to me Babylon is imploding. First time ever, China, as far as gross domestic product, is coming up above America with their producing. But China is a seller. China isn't a buyer. They have 1.5 billion people there. That's 5 times the size of American people. But they're not buying. Of course, 1.5 million people are going to buy something, but they're not the importers. America, one nation, imports about even still today, about 25% of all the world's products. One nation, they're doing that. So who else? Is Europe importing? Maybe a little bit. Nothing like America. Not even probably a tenth of what America does. Who is importing? Is Japan importing? I doubt it. No. Is Russia importing? No. Logically think to yourself, why would the merchants of the earth be weeping and mourning because no one's buying their merchandise? Because only America are the buyers. And that's what people don't understand. That America is built on a tower of debt right now, and they're still buying, but nobody has money there. You go to America, people don't have money in the bank. Maybe the 1%ers, as we hear, they have a lot of money, but the average person doesn't have money. But they certainly have a lot of plastic in their pockets, and that's what they use, debt. But this is why the merchants of the earth, nobody else could it be but America. Never again will there be trading of merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple and silk, scarlet, aromatic wood, every ivory vessel of every precious wood, and of bronze and of iron and marble, cinnamon, perfumes, ointment, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, bodies, and souls of men, like we just said. Using slave labor all over the world. Now, interesting enough, the 25 things that are named here, not only does Babylon trade more in a day than the whole world can buy, you can only trade in Babylon. Babylon is the only place that has a commodity exchange that you could trade all these every day. And you want to know something, go back to 1981 or 82, I think there were 3 stock markets in the world. There was the one in England, there was the one in the US, and maybe one other one. Today, every country has a stock market because they've taken the system of Babylon and they've recreated it. But as far as commodities, it all comes out of Chicago or New York. That most of them. There is a commodity exchange in England for gold and some other things, but most of this, all of these, only in Babylon can they all be traded. And the ripe fruits that your soul lusted after have went away from you, and all the things delicious and splendid have perished from you, and you shall obtain them no more. If you've lived international as we have, right now we're getting towards Sukkot, but what have you been eating for the last month and a half as far as fruits go? Most of you have been eating watermelons, right? This is the watermelon season. Maybe mangoes are coming in, right? But you're not eating strawberries. Anybody here been eating strawberries? No, because it's not strawberry season. In Babylon, you could eat strawberries all year long. You could eat watermelon all year long. You could eat blueberries. You could eat whatever you want because it's not based on the growing season there. It's based like he says here. The ripe fruits of your soul lusted after went away from you. You could have anything, any hour of the day. The merchants of these things, the ones being enriched from her, will stand afar off, because the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, and saying, woe to the great city, having been clothed in linen and purple and scarlet, showing the riches that Babylon has, and having been girded with gold and precious stone and pearls. For in 1 hour such great wealth was desolated. And every ship pilot and all the company of the ships and the sailors, and as many as worked by sea, stood afar and cried, seeing the smoke of her burning, saying, what other is like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads and cried and wept with mourning, and saying, woe, woe to the great city, by which all those ships in the sea were rich from her costliness, because in 1 hour she was ruined. And very interesting, America is the only place in the world that when the ships would come through the Atlantic Ocean, and you would come into the harbor in New York, as you make your turn, the first thing you see is a gigantic water tower that says, welcome to Babylon. Babylon, New York? The only other place beside Babylon in Iraq, that's called Babylon, as far as that I know. Could be another place now, but as far as I know, that's the only place. So very interesting that that's the first thing that people see. So again, if we're logical with ourselves, Saudi Arabia is not the steam engine of the world economy, and not even China up to now, because like I said, China may be sellers, but China's are not buyers, and Babylon is a democracy. Babylon is a melting pot. If we look at all the other things, China just doesn't fit. But the first thing I want to do is I want to read you some statistics, because the message I'm giving is called Babylon Given 70 Years to Rule the Nations. And I want to read to you. Ooh, don't tell me I forgot that paper. I think I forgot that paper. I had another paper here with my statistics that I don't have, but I know some of them off the top of my head that I will go over. But I'm going to read in a little bit showing that 70 years are given for Babylon to rule the nations. So the question is, when does that start? And I don't think we can say for sure, but we know around the time. We know around the time. I'll get into that maybe as I get into that next scripture. But the paper that I wanted to show you is stats from 1950, showing the power of America economically in the world from 1950. That 70 to 80% of all the iron in the world was produced by America. That when you look at the produce of cows and milk and all these things, 25% of all the world. Now remember, you have a couple of hundred countries in the world, and one country to be producing that much of oil, petroleum oil, 60% of it coming from Babylon. When you're talking about copper and zinc and aluminum, 90% of the world in 1950 coming from America. So how on earth can we read these scriptures that talk about Babylon producing all these things, and America, one country, is producing between 50 and 80% of everything? Do you know cars today, where do all the cars come from? Japan, right? In 1950, 56% of all the cars in the world were produced in America. Ford, Chrysler, right? GM. So we see a progressive slide of Babylon through the years, right? Because Babylon's ready to fall or has already fallen. But when this started, 1945 was the year that World War II ended. 1945 was the year that the International Monetary Fund was made, the United Nations, the World Bank, all these things. So somewhere between 45 and 50 is a good guess that Babylon had to start, which shows you there ain't a lot of years left for Babylon. And if we believe the word of Yahweh, then we'd have to believe 70 years are given to run the nations. That it's not as hard as we make it out to be. And you want to know something? For 20 years, I have preached this message of Babylon all over the world. I preached it in Asia, in Africa, South America, everywhere. And people are amazed. There's only one place that I've ever had people not believe it. And where do you think that is? United States of Babylon. Because they don't want to believe it, because it affects them. Because once you believe it, there's accountability to it. It's the same reason why an atheist doesn't want to believe in Yahweh, right? I always tell someone when they tell me they're an atheist, I say, you're not that stupid. Nobody can be that stupid. That you can just believe that somebody put a firecracker there and it blew up and here we are. It doesn't work that way, But the reason why an atheist says they don't believe in an Elohim is because they don't want accountability. Somebody recently had told me, well, I don't believe in, they were saying, I don't believe in Yahweh, but maybe aliens brought us here. I said, well, it's just as easy to believe in Yahweh than believe in an alien. What proof would you have in an alien bring me here? But again, it shows it's that somebody doesn't want accountability to it. So again, looking statistic-wise, there's no doubt. I mean, the overwhelming statistics of what America, when they started this end time at Babylon, what they were producing in absolutely everything. I mean, you name it, that they were not producing 20% of the world, which would be a lot. They're producing 50 to 80 in some instances, like copper and zinc, magnesium, 90%. It's unbelievable to think about, So it's not that hard to figure out who Babylon is. And I don't want to go more into that. But I do want to show that beside being the world policeman, that Babylon is about economics. So when you see the economic table turning, it's another sign the 70 years has got to be coming to an end. And that's what we're starting to see now. We've been seeing it for a while, but now bigger things are on the horizon that are already happening to show that the 70 years of Babylon are coming very close. Let's go to Jeremiah 25, and let's just read about that. Jeremiah 25. I'm going to start in verse 11. He says, "This whole land shall be a waste and a horror, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. So basically, Yahweh gives Babylon to rule the nations for 70 years. And that's why, even at times when you said, wow, how can America get away with this? Why aren't there things happening there? Because Yahweh gave them 70 years. And if you look back in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, there were a lot of natural disasters happening at that time. Hardly ever was there one in America. But there was a lot happening, mudslides in Honduras and probably even Nicaragua, these places, things happening in Japan, earthquakes. Indonesia had the great tsunami there that killed. But if you look in the last probably 3 years or so, I would say probably close to 50 to 75% of the real big things are happening in America now. I mean, as I read some of these scriptures, they're shocking how much they're coming to be filled. What's happening in California and some of these other places that are there. But he says they'll serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall be when 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation. So, is it just a city? No. I'll punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the nation of Babylon, and the land of the Chaldeans for their iniquity, says Yahweh. And I will make it everlasting ruin. So it's not just a system. It's a nation, it's a land. And I will bring on that land all the words which I have spoken against it, all that is written in this book that Jeremiah has prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will lay service on them, even they. And I will repay them according to their deeds, according to the work of their own hands. We just read this in Revelation 18. For so says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, to me, take the wine cup of this wrath from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I will send you to drink it. And they shall drink it, and to reel to and fro, and be maddened because of the sword I will send among them. Then I took the cup from the hand of Yahweh, and made all the nations to drink, those to whom Yahweh had sent me. Jerusalem, and the cities of Judah, and their kings, and their rulers, to make them a ruin, a horror, a hissing, and a curse, as to this day. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and his servants, and rulers, and the people, and all the mixed people, all the kings of the land of Uz, and the kings of the land of the Philistines, and Ashkelon, and Gaza, and Ekron, the remnant of Ashdod, Edom and Moab, the sons of Ammon, and the kings of Tyre, and all the kings of Sidon, and the coastal kings beyond the sea, Dedan and Tema, Buz, and all who cut the corners of their beards, and all the kings of Arabia, and the kings of mixed people who dwell in the desert, and all the kings of Zimbri, and all the kings of Elam, and the kings of Media, and all the kings of the north, far and near, each one to his brother, and all the kingdoms of the world which are on the face of the earth. So this is a worldwide thing, and the king of Shishak shall drink after them. So interesting here, I have who all these nations are. Jordan, Palestinians, Lebanon, possibly Cyprus, Turkey, and the Greek islands, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Iran, Ukraine, Georgia, Russia, Iraq. Basically all the nations that are in this area. And that's where the end time seems to focus, is on this area over here. He says, and look what's happening now. These are all the areas that we see, ISIS and all this stuff coming about. He says, so you shall say to them, so says Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, drink and be drunk and vomit and fall and do not rise because of the sword that I will send among you. And if it shall be you refuse to take the cup from your hand to drink, then you shall say to them, so says Yahweh of hosts, surely you will drink. For behold, I begin to bring evil on the city on which is called by my name, judgment coming to Jerusalem. And shall you be found entirely without guilt? You shall not be without guilt. For I will call for a sword on all those living on the earth. This is without a doubt the day of Yahweh, says Yahweh of hosts. And now you prophesy against them all these words and say, Yahweh will roar from on high and give forth his voice from his holy habitation, Mount Zion. He shall mightily roar over his dwelling place. He answers without a shout like those who tread out the grapes against those living on the earth. A roaring will go from the ends of the earth. For Yahweh has a controversy with all nations. Why? Because all the nations have followed in the footsteps of Babylon. They've mimicked the same system. He will enter into judgment with all flesh. He will give the wicked to the sword, says Yahweh. So says Yahweh of hosts, behold, evil is going from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind shall be stirred up from the corners of the earth. I mean, we're seeing it now here, right? With Tunisia and Libya and Egypt and now Syria going over to Iraq and Lebanon. What happens now when it starts going down to South America? What happens when it's going to go to Honduras, to Nicaragua? It's going to be on the whole earth. What we're seeing happening now and spreading is coming to the earth. And the slain of Yahweh will be at that day from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. They shall not be mourned nor gathered nor buried. They shall be as dung on the face of the earth. Wow. Heavy words from Yahweh. And you could say he's pretty angry. He's angry, and his mercy is taken away, his grace is taken away from the earth during this time because people have refused him. You know, so again, we could pray and we could feel bad, but if people have refused Yahweh, what can we do? What can we do? But 70 years are given to Babylon to run the nations, and like I said, the key to Babylon, it's an economic power. Now, very interesting. If you go back to 1945, when this end time was starting, for every debt, every dollar of debt that America borrowed, they were able to produce $2.42. So debt is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, let's say Andy wanted to turn this into a hotel, and he went out and borrowed $1 million, right? And he fixed it all up, but in his first year he brings back $2.5 million, right? That could be used for something good. So in 1945, Babylon, for every dollar they're borrowing, they're creating $2.42. By 1973, that number went down to 42 cents for every dollar of debt. Today, it's at nothing, maybe a penny. For every dollar they're borrowing, they might be bringing back a penny, and they're going into the negative. And if you know anything about the system of debt, I did a good message on Babylon, the system of debt, the only way a system like this can continue is by expanding it. That's the only way. You have to keep expanding it. Once the debt stops expanding, because everybody owes, and the only way you can pay more is by expanding the debt. It's just like, I'll give you a very simple analogy. Let's say that you had credit cards for $50,000, and you were running out of money, you weren't working, and you were running up your credit cards for $20,000, right? You can still borrow on your credit cards to pay your debt, and you're not going to go under. So as long as you can still borrow more money, now your debt is expanding, because next month now you owe $25,000. But you're not going under, you're not losing, right? But you keep expanding. Once you get to the point that there's no more money to borrow, what happens? You can't survive because your paycheck isn't paying your bills. That's why you're borrowing every month. And that's the problem with America, that their debt now, on paper, you know, is something like 18 trillion, but they're not adding in all their unfunded liabilities like Medicare, Medicaid, that they have to pay. They owe something like $130 trillion. And again, to us, they're just numbers. They don't mean anything because there's no such thing as $1 trillion. Nobody ever had it. But just to give you an example to show you, if you took $1 million bills, right, you could stack it about as high as the Empire State Building. That's a lot of money, right? 1 million, about as high as the Empire State Building. Pretty high building. But do you know that if you stacked $1 trillion, you can go around the Earth about 1.5 times? There's a big difference between a million and a trillion beside the letter B and the letter T. You know, I mean, it's a vast. I mean, vast. $1 trillion is not even like a real number. You know, when you look at it, and you're talking about $130 trillion of debt that just keeps going. And that's why, like I said, unless that system keeps expanding, and they're at a point that they can't expand anymore, and that's why it's getting ready to implode. I want to read you an article here on that. That's very interesting. It's from a magazine called The Crux. It says, first look, U.S. dollar substitute to go public, October 20th. The International Monetary Fund, and they're the last fund because the Federal Reserve is also out of money. They're leveraged, I think it's something like 722 to 1 of the money they have, and what's been borrowed out because they've created 4.3 trillion or close to 5 trillion just in the last few years into the American debt system. The only people that have money left is the IMF. So who are the IMF? The IMF is basically made up of Arabs, terrorists, I mean people that you can't even imagine, and they're the only ones that are only about 22 to 1 leverage. And now the International Monetary Fund, the ones that are bailing everybody out, right, whether you want to be bailed or not, they're getting ready to come out with a new currency. The International Monetary Fund is one of the most secretive and powerful organizations in the world. They monitor the financial health in more than 185 countries. They establish global money rules and provide bailout assistance to bankrupt nations. Aren't they so good? And on the 20th of this year, 2015, the IMF is expected to announce a reserve currency alternative to the US dollar, which will send hundreds of billions of dollars moving around the world literally overnight. According to Juan Zaretti, who helped implement financial sanctions while serving under George W. Bush's Treasury Department, he says once the other currency becomes an alternative to the dollar, the rules of the game begin to change. According to currency expert Steve Zugard, recently featured on CNBC and Bloomberg Financial News, he says, I've been active in the markets for over 2 decades now, but I've never seen anything that could move so much money so quickly. Hundreds of billions of dollars could change hands in a single day after this announcement is made. The announcement will start a domino effect that will basically determine who in America gets rich and who struggles. Dr. Zigard says if you own U.S. assets, and that includes stocks, bonds, real estate, or just cash in the bank, you should be aware of what's about to happen and know how to prepare. Experts say this announcement, which is expected on October 20th, could trigger one of the most profound transfers of wealth in our lifetime. So this isn't just something that is theory. This is something that's in the process of working. You've seen the stock markets in the last week or two. And it's not just the stock markets, it's the banks, the money supply. It's all happening. Why? It's happening because of what started happening a month ago in China. Because China is devaluing their currency. China is also wanting to come up with a world currency. That's why they've been hoarding gold. If you remember, about 6 months ago, I sent out a article to the brethren showing that China probably has 3 times the amount of gold that they said. And now for the first time, and I don't know how many decades, they started announcing their gold, and guess what? They have way more gold than they've been saying, because they're trying to put a currency together again. Russia has also started to dump U.S. dollars as well as China on the market. And if you watch the news, Jack Lew, the Treasury Secretary of America, said we will hold China accountable for what they're doing in this currency war. The game's already begun now, and I don't think it's going back from here. Another thing very interesting, I don't know how much of an effect it will have, but it was in the news about a week ago, that ISIS, the Islamic State, guess what they started doing? August 30th. They started minting money. They started minting coins, gold, silver, bronze, and iron. Where do we hear that from? Let's go to Daniel 2. Daniel 2 and verse 28. This is when the king Nebuchadnezzar has the dream, and he's coming to Daniel. And what does Daniel say? He says, there is a law in heaven who reveals secrets and makes known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. So Daniel is not a book from 2,500 years ago. It's a book, there's at least 5, 6, or 7 references that say that this book is for the latter days. This is one of them. Your dream and your visions on your bed are these. I'll drop down to verse 31. You, O king, were seeing, and behold, a certain great image. That great image stood before you with a brilliant brightness, and its form was terrifying. The head of the image was of fine gold, the breast and its arms were of silver, its belly and thighs were of bronze, or copper, either way, and its legs were of iron. Its feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. So, one thing that will happen is when the system now that's built on a cashless society, once that collapses, this kind of currency, to have actually coins and currency, that's the way society has always traded for years. When Abraham is buying the cave in Machpelah for his family, what does he do? He weighs out silver. That's always been the means of currency that's here. So I find it very interesting that not only is ISIS minting these, they're using them all over. Because ISIS is big on the black market for oil. They control a lot of oil in Iraq. They control a lot of the oil in Syria. And they're selling the oil to some of their enemies even. Turkey is buying a lot of the oil because people can get it cheap. And they're using these coins for oil. Also, I didn't mention, I've mentioned it before, but the petrodollar system. What does it benefit America to be the reserve currency of the world? Well, what it did when they started this petrodollar system in the 1970s, It gave stability to the world because the dollar was a very stable currency at that time. And what it gave to America is that every country in the world could only buy oil, the largest commodity that the world trades in today can only be bought in US dollars. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a country, let's say like China, why does China own $1.3 trillion? Because when China goes to buy their oil from Russia, they have to take it in American dollars. So how do they get American dollars? They buy US treasuries. They buy the treasuries, they get the promissory notes, and they pay in dollars. Once that stops, what happens? Your currency implodes overnight, just like we were reading. One day Babylon is fallen. And that's easily the currency way that would happen. So now we're seeing that Russia is turning from this because America was attacking Russia and their banks and not allowing Russia to use the SWIFT system and all those things. All these things have been happening, and we're seeing them going quicker as we're coming toward the end this time. So if that's the case, why do you think in Babylon there's such a laxity? Why do you think that people aren't preparing or getting ready? And I believe it's what I call the normalcy bias. I want to go to Psalm 49. Psalm 49, in verse 11-12. It says, "Their inward thought is that their houses will last forever, their dwelling places to all generations. They call lands after their own names. But man shall not remain high in honor. He is like the animals, they shall be cut off." It's the normalcy bias. That, since 1945, we haven't had a world war. We've had wars. We've had the Korean War. We've had Vietnam, different things. Some even say whether it's a war or police action. But we haven't had a world war. And many of the people that were in those world wars, 1 and 2, are dead. They're not alive today. So it's a different world. And I don't think in Babylon it's a reality that America could cease to be a nation. Even though every other empire, Egypt, Rome, you name it, Assyria, Greece, they all came and fell, that there's a time for everything. I just don't think that the people there think there'll ever be a time that America will not be the world power. And yet, if you really are honest with it, the time has already changed. They're really not the world power anymore. It's already changed. And praise Yahweh that He's given His people some time to prepare for this. Because it'll be extremely difficult when the bottom falls out and you can't even get money out of the bank. Because people say, now, where do you go? And you know what they're really saying? Where can I go that's like Babylon? Because I can give you 150 nations to go to. There's a lot of places you can go to. And as an American with an American passport, almost any place on earth except for Israel will take you. Almost any place. So there's a lot of places you can go, but people want to go to a place that's like Babylon, and Yahweh's destroying Babylon. It's about leaving that system. It's about purifying yourself. And I give the example of myself, because I can only judge myself, that I left Babylon thinking I was one of the obedient ones, until I got down to Central America, and I realized I had no faith. It was the greatest thing in my life I ever did. Because until you leave, you will never know what you need. You'll never know it because you don't see it. There's that blind spot that's there that will never be taken away until you're out of there. But once you're out, then you start to see, wow, I need to change here, I need to change here, I need to change here. And that's why Yahweh has given His people the time to do it. But the normalcy bias of people just thinking it's going to go on and on and on like this forever. And what that is, it's really going against the first commandment. Because you're not believing in Yahweh. Hebrews 11:6. To please Yahweh, you must believe He is. And how can you believe He is if you don't believe that all these things He says are going to come? Especially with all the signs He's showing us right now. Jeremiah 50. Jeremiah 50. Verse 1 through 5. Now let's read a little bit about what Scripture says is going to happen to Babylon. Now I will say this before I start, because some people say, well, maybe this happened already, maybe this is history we were reading. It absolutely isn't. When Babylon was destroyed by the Persians in 539 BC, it basically happened overnight that the Persians and the Medes, they came in, they diverted the water of Babylon another way. The soldiers came underneath the waterway, they opened up the 2 leaf gates, just like it says in Isaiah 44 and 45, and they came in and took the city. You don't see anything in any historical records that ever say that there was a fleeing, particularly of Jews, that there was mass murdering, that there was killing, and that nobody was left. Nothing. A matter of fact, the opposite. If you believe Scripture and you read Ezra and Nehemiah, what you see is that the Medes and the Persians, because of what Yahweh wrote about King Darius, they allowed Judah to come back. They gave him the money. They gave him everything to come back to Israel and rebuild the temple. So there is nothing in history that tells us there was a mass killing of Jews or Israelites back then. As a matter of fact, there weren't even Israelites living there. So Jeremiah 50 and 51 definitely is prophecy. I'll prove that to you as we read it. It's not something that's history. So it starts and says, the word that Yahweh spoke against Babylon, against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. So again, it's a land, it's a nation, it's not simply a system. Declare among the nations and make them hear and lift up a banner. Again, messianic. Make them hear, do not hide it. Say Babylon is captured. Bel is put to shame. Merodach is broken in pieces. Her images are put to shame. Her idols are broken in pieces. For a nation comes up against her from the north, which shall make her land a desert. Yea, no one shall dwell there. They shall flee. They shall go, both man and animal. And people in the past have laughed and said, oh, is Canada going to attack America? Oh, it doesn't say that the country to the north of them is attacking them. It says they come from the north. And if you look at a map, you will see that, forget Mexico for now. I know Donald Trump wants to build a fence back there. Let him do it, if you can. But the problem is the north. The problem is you got thousands of miles of border with nothing up there, And who is on the other side of Canada that's up there from the north is Russia. So very easily, they can come there from the north. For a nation comes against her from the north, which will make her land a desert. Yea, no one shall dwell there. They shall flee. They shall go, both male and animal. In these days and at that time, again, Hebrew idiom meaning end time. So this is definitely not just history, it's end time. In these days and at that time, the sons of Israel shall come, declares Yahweh. They and the sons of Judah together, going and weeping, they shall go and seek Yahweh their Elohim. So again, whoever Babylon is, it's saying that Judah and Israel living in Babylon, and they're going to come going and weeping. Now, if you look at the world today, you have Jews living in a lot of countries, but very few. Only up until recently has Israel, the nation of Israel, had as many Jews living in Israel as they do in America. Up until just a couple of years ago, America had more Jews living in it than even Israel. Now they're about equal. Israel probably has a little bit more. But you have about 100 million Israelites living in America, and you have about the same amount of Jews living here, 6, 7 million Jews living there. So what other country would have that many Israelites and Jews coming from their country over here to the Holy Land? Only America would fit this, and in the times we're living in. They shall seek the way to Zion with their faces pointing there, saying, come and let us join ourselves to Yahweh in an everlasting covenant, never to be forgotten. So it's actually a promising scripture that some people will wake up and will come out and seek Yahweh. Verse 8, he says, flee from the midst of Babylon, and go out of the land of the Chaldeans, and be as the he-goats before the flock. For behold, I am stirring up and bringing up a company of great nations. So it's not just one nation, but a company of nations from a northern land against Babylon. So they're not coming from the north right by Babylon, but from a northern land, they're coming to destroy Babylon. And they shall array themselves against her. They shall be captured there. Their arrows shall be those as a mighty men, skillful men, they shall not return empty. And Chaldea shall be a prize, all who plunder her will be satisfied, declares Yahweh. Because you rejoice, because you exalt, O destroyers of my inheritance. And like we said, 25, 30 years ago, most of the first fruit brethren were in Babylon. Now, virtually none. They're destroying Yahweh's inheritance there. Because you are fat like the heifer in the grass, and neigh like strong ones. Your mother will be deeply ashamed. She who bore you will turn pale. Behold, the last of the nations, that's in succession, shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. More clues. No country in the world is as overweight as America. No country. I mean, everything is supersized. You barely hold the cups anymore when you go in these places, and everything's free to get more. Unlimited sugar. And that's why diabetes is just off the scale. And your mother, who's the mother of America? Great Britain, right? Mother will be ashamed of you. The last of the nations, right? Look at Syria is still there today. Egypt is still there today, right? Some of these ancient places. But Babylon is the last of the superpowers. They're only 200 years old, So they're the last in succession of the nations. They're the last superpower that's there. And he says there'll be a desert and a dry land. Drop down to verse 18. So Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, says this, Behold, I am punishing the king of Babylon and his land as I have punished the king of Assyria. And I will again bring Israel to his home. And that's why I say, people sometimes misquote me, that I'm saying the regathering is... No, I didn't say that. I do believe there'll be a remnant that comes to the land before the millennium starts. Scripture tells us this. But primarily it'll happen after Babylon falls. After Babylon falls, when there's this fleeing, after Israel falls. But not now. I've never said that. Any meeting I've ever went to, when people said I'm ready to go, I said the door ain't open yet. You can't come here now. It's impossible. It's impossible to get visas. It's not the time yet. You could visit, which I encourage people for the last 20 years. Come to the feast, come and visit, but the door isn't open to live here. And for most people anyway, and it's not the timing yet. He says, I will bring Israel again to his home, and he will feed on Carmel and Bashan, and his soul will be satisfied on Mount Ephraim and Gilead. In those days and at that time, again, so this is end time, states Yahweh, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, and it is not, in the sins of Judah, and they will not be found, for I will pardon whom I will leave as a remnant. That's the new covenant coming in force. Go up against the land of Merinathim. It's a euphemism for Babylon, which literally means double punishment or double bitterness. Against it and against the dwellers of Pekod, which means your visitation of punishment. Waste and destroy after them, says Yahweh, and do according to all that I've commanded you. A sound of battle is in the land in great ruin. How the hammer of all the earth is cut and broken. How Babylon has become a ruin among the nations. Babylon is the hammer. Literally in Hebrew, that means one that pounds other nations. Right? So you look at all the police actions that America has done everywhere. You tell me what other nation in the world has army and bases in every single part of the world. Everywhere. I can't tell you the exact number off the top of my head, but it's hundreds of bases everywhere. All over Europe, all over Central and South America, all over Asia, all over everywhere America has their bases, the hammer of the earth, and they pound. I have laid a trap for you, and you also are captured, Babylon, and you didn't know. You were found and also caught because you stirred up yourself against Yahweh. See, so Yahweh gave them the power for his purpose, of bringing the freedom, to bring the good news message, and what did they do? They used it to corrupt it. Yahweh has opened his armory and has brought out the weapons of his fury. For this is a work of Adonai Yahweh of hosts in the land of the Chaldeans. Come against her from the end, open her granaries, pile her up as heaps and utterly destroy her. Do not let a remnant be left. And it's interesting, it says open the granaries, where America used to have several years of extra grain storage there. Now it's down to just, I think, a month or two, that they have. Put the sword to all her bulls, let them go down to slaughter. I don't know if you saw recently, something like, was it 60,000?
Antelope.
Antelope that just died. They don't know why. Really strange, but it happens there. Put the sword to her bulls, let them go down to the slaughter. Woe to them, for their day has come, the time of their punishment. The voice of those who flee and escape out of the land of Babylon, to declare in Zion the vengeance of Yahweh Elohim, the vengeance of his sanctuary. So it gives encouragement that where do you go when you flee Babylon? Anywhere, because you're not going to stay there. You've got to get to the wilderness. And there's been, if you read Numbers 33, there's 42 stops that Israel had in the wilderness. What does that tell you? You have 7 stops left before the Jubilee. One more Shemitah. So you've got to get to the wilderness. If you want to get to the kingdom, you've got to go through the wilderness. That's the way you get to the kingdom. And it's not going to be by sitting in Babylon in front of a TV with eating popcorn. And then all of a sudden Yeshua comes and it's like, okay, let me turn off the program and get going here. You got to get to the wilderness sooner or later. And you have to go through the wilderness to get to the kingdom of Yahweh. That's the way it's going to happen. Like I said, there's still 7 stops. There's 1 Shemitah left. Very interesting. The voice of those who flee and escape out of Babylon, to declare the vengeance of Yahweh Elohim, the vengeance of his sanctuary. Make the archers hear against Babylon. All you who tread a bow, camp against it all around. Let none of them escape. Repay her according to her work, according to all she has done, do to her. For she has been proud against Yahweh, against the Holy One of Israel. One of the biggest problems in Babylon is the pride. Won't follow a man, no judicial order. Okay, this is the punishment that comes. Because it's not about not following the judicial order of me, it's following the judicial order of Yahweh. And each will reap what they sow. So her young men will fall in the streets, and her men of war will be silenced in that day, declares Yahweh. So the army of America is not going to win this war. Behold, I am against you, O proud one, says Adonai, Yahweh of hosts. For your day has come, the time I will punish you. Everything has to deal with the time. The time of visitation, the time that Yahweh says. For 70 years, when Yahweh gave Babylon the power, what does he say? Any nation that doesn't follow Babylon, you're going to get it. And it's happened. Nobody could come against America. But those 70 years are ending. And America will not have anything behind them. And the proud one will stumble and fall, and none shall raise them up. And I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it will burn up everything around him. Have you seen this summer how bad the forest fires have been in California and Washington? They said worse than they've ever had. So says Yahweh of hosts, the sons of Israel and the sons of Judah are oppressed together in Babylon. Yea, all who captured them held them fast, they refused to let them go. Their Redeemer is strong, Yahweh of hosts is his name. Surely he will plead their cause, so that he may give rest to the land and make to tremble the dwellers of Babylon. A word is on the Chaldean states, a sword is on the Chaldean states, Yahweh, and on those living in Babylon, and on her rulers, and on her wise men. A sword is on the liars, and they shall become fools. A sword is on her mighty men, and they will be broken. A sword is on his horses and his chariots, and all the mixed people in her mix. Remember, Babylon is a great melting pot. And they shall become like women. A sword is on her treasuries, and they will be robbed. They say that all the gold is gone from America. I've seen reports on this for the last couple of years. We'll see shortly. A drought is on her waters, and they'll be dried up. You see what's happening in California? They said this has not happened in 12 to 1,500 years or longer that they know. That when you look at California, the water that was there and what it's down to now, it's unprecedented. And it's getting to the point of being more than unprecedented. It's getting to the point of irreversibility. That when they get so low, the aquifers are collapsing in on themselves, and they'll never be able to be used again. So it's serious there, because California alone is the 6th largest economy in the world. The state of California. So California goes, and so there's Babylon. A drought is on her waters, and they will be dried up. For it is the land of idols, and they boast themselves in idols. So the beasts of the desert shall dwell there with jackals, and the daughters of the ostrich will dwell in her again. And it shall not again have anyone in it forever. It shall not be lived in from generation to generation. As Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighbors, states Yahweh, so no man will live there, nor shall a son of man stay in it. Behold, a people will come from the north, and a great nation, and many kings will be stirred up to the furthest parts of the earth. So the same way Babylon was making these coalitions against others, it's a full coalition coming against them. And what's interesting here is, he says, behold, a people come from the north, and a great nation, and many kings. Well, Persia, that's one of the ones that destroyed Babylon, is to the east. It's not to the north. Persia is east of ancient Babylon, which shows you again, it's not talking about the land of Babylon here. Some people say, this is Babylon. Ancient Babylon. It's like, they're the world policemen? Come on. That's a joke. America gave them billions of dollars of equipment and tanks and everything else. 5 ISIS guys came and they dropped everything and ran in the other direction. And they're certainly not the world economic power of the world. Ancient Babylon of today. They lay hold of a bow and a javelin. They shall be cruel and will show no mercy. Their voice will roll like the sea. And arrayed like a man for the battle, they shall ride on horses against you, O daughter of Babylon. Whenever they say daughter, it's showing that it's not the original Babylon here, but it has the same characteristics. The king of Babylon has heard their report, and his hands became limp. Limp. Like, anguish took hold of him, pangs like a woman giving birth. So we see what's happening there. Let's drop down to verse 45. So hear the counsel of Yahweh, that he has planned against Babylon, and his purpose, which he has purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely they shall drag them, the least of the flock. Surely he will make their dwelling desolate over them. At the sound of Babylon's capture, the earth shall tremble, and a cry is heard among the nations. So again, why? You tell me any other nation in the world, anybody, including China, that if it fell tomorrow, it would completely destroy the whole world. There is no other nation that would fall that would completely destroy the world except America. Without a shadow of a doubt. At the sound of Babylon's capture, the earth shall tremble, and a cry is heard among the nations. Let's go to Jeremiah 51. We'll read some scriptures there. starting in verse 1. So says Yahweh, behold, I am arousing a destroying wind against Babylon and against those dwelling in the heart of my foes. And I will send foreigners to Babylon who will sift her and shall empty her land. For in the day of evil they shall be against her all around. Do not let the one treading fully tread his bow, nor go up in his armor, and do not spare her young men. Utterly destroy all her army. So the slain shall fall in the land of the Chaldeans, yea, pierce through in her streets. Drop down to verse 6. Flee from the midst of Babylon, yea, each man deliver his soul. Do not be silenced in her iniquity, for it is the time of the vengeance of Yahweh. He will give to her a just recompense. He will repay her. Babylon has become a golden cup in the hand of Yahweh, making all the earth drunk. See, before Babylon was useful to Yahweh, but now it's a golden cup on the outside, but filled with every kind of filth and abomination. And just to show you, just the difference in 10 years. 10 years ago, or even, let's start in 1998. 1998, Bill Clinton, who I would far from call a conservative, you know. I mean, one of the most liberal presidents, Democrat. Bill Clinton signs a defense of marriage law back in 1998, that marriage is between a man and a woman, right? Because the majority of people wanted that. At that point, it might have even been over 60%. About 10 years ago, it was 56% were for it, and there was maybe 46% against. Today, it's the total opposite. Today, you're closing in on 60% of Americans are for gay marriage. Or for, you know, how could that be? Where now the Supreme Court comes out just recently and says this summer, you know, that it's a constitutional right. And now you're starting to see what's happening. Now we're starting to see, you know, that as a believer, what you believe for your faith, like that woman from Kentucky or wherever she's from, you're going to go to prison if you act on your faith. And what's it going to do for most Laodiceans? Lukewarm. It's going to hide them in the corners. They're not going to stand up for the truth. You don't even see the leaders standing up for the truth. Why aren't they standing up for this woman? Why aren't people demanding that she gets out of prison? You know, you're not seeing it. So Babylon is it's like I said, it's become, her sins have reached up to the heaven. It's become every filth. The nations have drunk of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Suddenly Babylon is fallen and is broken. Wail for her. Take balm for her pain, if perhaps she could be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go each into his own country. For her judgment reaches to the heavens and is lifted up to the skies. And that word for lift up in Hebrew is NASA. Babylon has a NASA, a space program, that reaches up to the skies. Yahweh has brought forth our righteousness. Come and let us declare in Zion the work of Yahweh our Elohim. Purify the arrows, fill the shields. Yahweh has aroused the spirit of the kings of the Medes. For his plan is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of Yahweh, the vengeance of his sanctuary. Lift up the banner upon Babylon's walls, make the watch strong. Set up the watches, prepare the ambushes, for Yahweh has both planned and has done that which he spoke against the people of Babylon. O you who live by many waters, rich in treasures, your end is come, the measure of your unjust gain and covetousness. And if you look at ancient Babylon, they're not really near a lot of waters, especially not freshwater seaports like it talks about in Revelation. Another sign that it's the daughter of Babylon, another Babylon that's there. We drop down to verse 27. Set up a banner in the land, again messianic. Blow a ram's horn among the nations. Consecrate nations against her. Make to hear the kingdoms of Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz who come together. And these are the areas of Russia and the break-off provinces that's there, possibly even Turkey. Set a marshal against her. Cause the horses to come like rough locusts. Consecrate nations against her with the kings of the Medes, her governors and all her rulers, and all the land of her dominion. And the land trembles and writhes in pain, for every purpose of Yahweh shall be done against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a waste without even one living in it. The mighty men of Babylon have stopped fighting. They have dwelt in their strongholds. Their might is withered. They became as women. They have burned their houses. Her bars are broken. A runner shall run to meet a runner shall run to meet a runner, and a herald to meet a herald, to announce to the king of Babylon that his city is captured from end to end. So we see, just like Rome, Babylon is a country, not just a city. And that the fords are captured, and they have burned the reeds with fire, and the men of war are terrified. For so says Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, the daughter of Babylon is like a grain floor. It is time to trample her. Yet a little while, and the time of her harvest will come. Drop down to verse 36. So Yahweh says this, behold, I will strive for you and take vengeance for you. And I will dry up her sea and make her wool dry. And Babylon shall become heaps, a home for jackals, a horror and hissing, without even one inhabitant. They shall roar together like lions, and they shall growl like lions' cubs. In their heat I will make their feasts, and I will make them drunk, so they rejoice and sleep a never-ending sleep, and never awaken, says Yahweh. I will bring them down like lambs to the slaughter, like rams with he-goats. How Shishak is captured, and how the praise of all the earth is seized. How Babylon has become a ruin among the nations. The sea has come up over Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of waves. I just sent that message out, the article, I think a month or two ago, showing that there's a mega super volcano right off of Seattle that they said definitely is going to blow at any time. And when it does, Seattle's gone. The whole west coast over there, you're talking about millions of people dying. What does he say? The sea has come up over Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of its waves. Her cities have become a ruin, a dry land in the wilderness, a land which no man dwells, nor does any son of man pass by. And I will punish Bel in Babylon, and bring forth out of his mouth that which has swallowed him up. And the nations shall not flow together any more to him, yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. My people go out of her midst, deliver each man his soul from the burning anger of Yahweh. And that your heart not faint, and you fear the report that shall be heard in the land. The report shall come in a year, and after that the report will come in another year. And there will be violence in the land, governor against governor. Civil war coming. So behold, the days come that I will punish on the idols of Babylon, and all her land shall be put to shame. And all her slain shall fall in the midst. Thus the heavens and the earth, and all that is in them, shall shout for Babylon. For the plunderer shall come to her from the north, says Yahweh. As Babylon is to fall for the slain of Israel, so for Babylon the slain of all the earth will fall. A lot of people had a hard time understanding this. What does it mean? For Babylon will fall for the slain of Israel. America is the greatest ally with Israel. Why would America ever come against Israel? What have we seen in the last couple of years? We've seen that every single thing that President Barack Obama has done since being in office has been to make Israel have unsustainable borders here. And now what's going to come very shortly, I pray it ain't till at least a couple of months, ISIS, you're going to see ISIS come in here. The same that's happening in Syria and happening in Lebanon, it's coming here and it's coming quick. I used to think it within 2 years, now I think it's months. Because I know for sure Israel is planning on going into Syria. And once they do that, the borders are gone, you're going to see all problems coming. You who have escaped the sword, go away, do not stand still. Remember Yahweh afar off, and let Jerusalem come into your mind. So like I said, it doesn't matter where you go when you leave Babylon. You got 7 steps in the wilderness. Get to the wilderness, let the Holy Spirit lead you, and the 7th step is Jerusalem. The 7th step is Mount Zion. Mount Zion. If you're faithful, that's where Yahweh's bringing his people to. But you've got to get in the game to get started. You've got to get going. Revelation 18, a little bit longer here. Just go back and read a little bit that I didn't from the beginning of Revelation 18. And after these things I saw another cherub coming down out of heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lighted up from his glory. And he cried with a strong great voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, it is fallen. Remember, Babylon falls twice. The first is its sovereignty, and then next is where it's completely destroyed during the day of Yahweh. It has become a dwelling place of those possessed by demons, and a home of every foul spirit, and a home of every unclean bird, even the home of every unclean and hateful beast. Wow, we're starting to see that now. Because the wine of the anger of her fornication with all the nations have drunk. Even the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth became rich from the power of her trade. Come on, who else can it be? And I heard another voice out of heaven saying, Leave the land of her, my people, that you may not share in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues. Because her sins joined together have reached up to heaven, and Yahweh remembered her unjust deeds. Just like the Tower of Babel, making the tower to heaven in rebellion of Yahweh. Give back to her, as she also gave back to you, and double to her double according to her works. And the cup which she mixed to her double, and that's why the double punishment that's coming. By what things she glorified herself and luxuriated. By so much give back to her torment and mourning, because she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, I am not a widow, I will not see sorrow. Because of this, in one day her plagues will come, death and mourning and Pharaoh and famine, and she will be consumed with fire, for Yahweh Elohim judging her is strong. Drop down to verse 20. Rejoice over her, heaven, and the cherubs, and the holy apostles and the prophets, because Yahweh has judged your cause on her. And a cherub took a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, So Babylon the Great will be thrown with violence, and shall be found no more. And the sounds of the harpers and musicians and flutists and trumpeters will not be heard in you, never. And every craftsman of every craft will not be found in you, never. And the sound of a mill will not be heard in you, never. And the light of a lamp will not shine in you, never. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will not be heard in you, never. That's a scary scripture to me. Because going through the tribulation time is one thing, but going through it without Yahweh is something that's almost impossible. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and by your sorceries, your pharmakia, all the nations were deceived. Another thing America has done. Pfizer, Merck, Johnson & Johnson. Getting everybody in the country on, I think my dad's on 9 or 12 pills a day. You know, give them something to give them high blood pressure, give them another pill to lower it. Give them all sugar to give them diabetes, give them another pill to get rid of it. Give them another pill against the kidney because of what you're taking for your diabetes. And pill after pill after pill after pill. By your pharmakia, all the nations were deceived. So we see when the financial system collapses, it's a game changer. And it's upon us, you know. It's upon us. That what we're starting to see now is something I've been talking about the last 2 years. And like I said, it's such a big balloon, nobody on earth can predict a day to it, because it's not just going to be one day. One day it will implode, but it's going to be a while going, all the aftermath of it. But what we're seeing is, I believe we're entering that now, that there's no turning back point, and I think the world powers are ready for it, especially if the IMF is coming up with an alternative to Babylon's money. I want to go over one more thing here before we end in the book of Daniel, because there's a parallel I see here to what happened to Nebuchadnezzar and end-time Babylon here in the end time. I want to start in Daniel 4, in verse 10. Daniel 4 in verse 10. He says, As to the visions of my head on my bed, I was looking, and behold, a tree was in the middle of the earth, and it was great. Now this is interesting. This is a very interesting chapter, because it's the only chapter in the whole Bible that's written by a Gentile. It's written by an unbeliever. Nebuchadnezzar is writing this chapter himself. But again, kings and kingdoms are interchangeable. And I think as we read, we're going to see that this is not about Nebuchadnezzar. It's about Babylon. It's about his kingdom. So even though he's the king that's going to happen to, really we're looking at the kingdom. He says, I was looking, behold, a tree was in the middle of the earth, and its height was great. Talking about Babylon. The tree became great and strong, and its height reached to the heaven. Right? Didn't we just read that about Babylon? The sins have gone up to heaven, and its appearance to the end of the earth. Babylon has been the world policeman of all the earth. And its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit plentiful. Remember, get any fruit any time of the year. And food for all was in it. How much has Babylon fed the world, right? With its grain and all its things. The beasts of the field sought shade under it, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches. And all flesh was fed from it. I was looking on the visions of my head on my bed, and behold, a watcher, even a holy one from the heaven, came down. And he cried with might and said this, Cut down the tree and cut off its branches. Shake off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds leave its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with a fetter of iron and bronze. Remember the four? You went from gold to silver to bronze and iron. And the grass of the field, and let it be wet as the dew of the heavens, and his lot be with the beasts of the grass. So I believe this is where we're seeing, remember what we said, there's two destructions of Babylon. The first one takes the sovereignty, but there's still a stump that's left. It's not completely destroyed. There's a stump there. And then the second one takes it. He says, Let his heart be changed from man's, and let the heart of the beast be given to him. And let 7 times pass over him. One Shemitah. One Shemitah. This matter is by the degree of the guardian cherubs and the command by the sword of the holy ones, so that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will, and he sets up over it the lowest, the basis of men. I mean, I think President Obama fulfills the scripture. I don't think you can get any more base than that, you know? Although there's been some base guys, George Bush wasn't much better, but I think it is part of fulfilling, not even meant in joking, I think it is part of fulfilling the prophecy, that Yahweh even allows the most basis of men for this. Go down to verse 20. He says, the tree that you saw, now we're going to see what it means, which became great and strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and its appearance to all the earth, and its leaves being beautiful, and its fruit plentiful, and food for all being under it, under which the beasts of the field lived, and the branches of the birds of the sky had their home. It was you, O king, Babylon. For you have become great and strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the sky, and your rule is to the end of the earth, just like we see. And as the king saw a guarding cherub and a holy one coming down from the heavens, and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and bronze. So it's showing us, you know, that maybe during the Silver period, that's when Babylon is just kind of out of it, when they're destroyed by the Medes and the Persians. But then when the world power is coming back up, this is where Babylon is revived. The iron and the bronze and the grass of the field. And let him be wet with the dew of the heaven, and his lot be with the beasts of the field, until 7 times passes over him. So Babylon falls, and then for 7 years they're not a player anymore, but we're going to see then something happens. This is the meaning that he says. O king, and this degree of the Most High, which is come on my master the king, and you shall be driven from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And you shall be fed with grass like oxen, and you shall be wet with dew of the heavens, and 7 years, 1 Shemitah cycle, shall pass over you until you know that the Most High is ruler in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whomever he desires. And in that day they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots. Your kingdom shall be enduring to you after you have realized that heaven rules. So that's why I say, the first time Babylon goes is not the end. It's only their sovereignty taken away, but the second time. Now, interesting, go back to Jeremiah 50 and verse 34. We read it before, but now it might stand out a little more. Jeremiah 50 and verse 34. When he's talking about the judgment of Babylon, look what he says. Their Redeemer is strong, Yahweh of hosts is his name. Surely he will plead their cause so that he may give rest to the land, and make to tremble the dwellers of Babylon. He will plead their cause to give rest to the land. Shemitah. Shemitah. So if Daniel 4 is not just talking about Nebuchadnezzar, but it's talking about Babylon, what it seems, I mean, you read it, it certainly seems like it's divination. It seems that Babylon will fall, and then the Medes and the Persians will last for 7 years until it brings on the end. We go to Revelation 13. It's kind of interesting because it says something that seems to fit that. Revelation 13. It says, and I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. We talked about that before. I'm not going to get into it now. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave its power and its throne and its great authority. If you put this together with Daniel 4 and Daniel 7, clearly it's talking about the UN, Security Council, you know, where you have the 5, but the interesting part here is you don't have the eagle, Babylon. You know, Babylon's already been destroyed, but look what he says, and I saw one of its heads, because Babylon was one of the heads. You have 5 permanent members to the Security Council, you have a Secretary General and a rotating president. There's 7 heads to the UN, and there's 10 toes, or 10 members that alternate. So one of the heads, Babylon, is having been slain to death, and its deadly wound was healed, and all the earth wondered after the beast. So it seems this is the part, because remember, the United Nations was inspired by Satan. It wasn't inspired by Yahweh. And what many people call the New World Disorder, because believe me, if people give too much credit to Satan and these leaders, if they could have made a world government, they would have done it already. And the reason why Satan is coming to earth in the flesh is because these people can't get it done. They've been trying to get it done now for 70 years and they can't get it done. So Satan will come Babylon's wound will be healed. There won't be a leader anymore, but they'll be there. And whoever this man of sin is from Daniel is gonna basically be the leader of this at that time. And like it says here, and they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, able to make war? And a mouth speaking great things and blasphemy were given to it, and authority was given it to act 42 months. Very interesting. Which seems to fit into the time frame. The last scripture I want to go into is in Daniel. Two scriptures, Daniel 5. Daniel 5. Because I believe we are just about at this point. Daniel 5, starting in verse 1. He says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to the thousands of his nobles, and he drank wine before the thousands. Belshazzar is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. This is in 539 BC. This is the night that Babylon is going to fall, right? And what happens? He's making this feast. He's using the things from the temple. Let's drop down to verse 4. And they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. Kind of interesting. Wood and stone is added to it. You see the Christians with the cross, bowing down to the wood. You see the Muslims and the Jews bowing down to stone, the Wailing Wall and the stone at Mecca. He says, at that moment, fingers of a man's hand came out and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace across from the lampstand. And the king saw the part of the hand that he wrote. Then the king's color was changed, literally turned white. And his thoughts troubled him, so the joints of his loins shook, and his knees knocked together one against another. I think any of us would. We saw a hand coming out of the wall doing that. Drop down to verse 17, because now they go and get Daniel, and Daniel's going to explain the meaning. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be to yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the meaning to the king and make the meaning known to him. O king, the Most High Allah gave your father Nebuchadnezzar a kingdom, and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all peoples and nations and languages trembled in fear before him, just like Babylon. He killed those who he desired, and whom he desired he kept alive. And whom he would he set up, and whom he desired he pulled down. You see it with Gaddafi, you see it with Saddam Hussein, you see it with all these. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was put down from the throne of his kingdom, and they took his glory from him. This is when Babylon's going to fall. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the animals, and his home was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of the heavens, until he knew that the Most High Allah is the ruler in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints over whomever he desires. And you, his son, technically his grandson, O Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have exalted yourself up against the master of heaven, and have brought the vessels of his house before you. You and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine with them. And you have praised the gods of silver, and gold, and bronze, and iron, and wood, and stone, which you do not see or hear, and do not know. And you have not glorified the Allah, in whose hand your life, breath, and always is. Then the part of the hand was sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written, a minna, a shekel, and half minas. This is the meaning of the thing. A minna, Allah has numbered your kingdom and finished it. 70 years to Babylon are given, and that's it. And you can be sure, 1,000% by the word of Yahweh, 70 years are given to Babylon, and that's it. A shekel, you're weighed in the scales and found lacking. Half minas, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians, the Russians, the Iranians, and all the others that are going to be part of this coalition. Daniel 12, last scripture here. Daniel 12, in verse 4. And like I said, Daniel is a book all about the end time. He says, but you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the end time. Here we are. Many will travel back and forth, and knowledge will be increased. Some of you just came in a day or two ago. You traveled thousands of miles, right? Who would have ever thought this? Do you realize if this was in Bible times, it would have been years to get you from there to over here. Even just go back to the 1945. You know, when my grandmother used to go from America to Italy, it would take 3 weeks by boat. That's how long it would take. 21, 24 days to go across the Atlantic. Just going to Italy at that point. Never mind over here to the Middle East. Many will travel back and forth, and knowledge will be increased. Like we say, I mean, I could spend a whole sermon on this. I probably should. But without a doubt, we've never ever had it like this. Drop down to verse 8. And I heard, but I did not understand. Why? because it wasn't the time of the end. And I said, "Oh, my master, what shall be the end of these things?" And he said, "Go, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the end time. Many will be purified and made white and refined," and this is what we're seeing now. Yahweh is purifying his people. "But the wicked will do wickedly," and boy, do we see that. "And not one of the wicked will discern, but the wise will discern." And this is what we're seeing. The wicked don't know. They don't understand it. They're just going out and being more wicked. But the wise discern it. The handwriting is on the wall. We just read it in Daniel 5. The question is, can you read it? Yahweh bless. Shabbat shalom.